Welcome to my podcast, Sip and Sala, where we lift the lid, spilling the tea on all things marriage, womanhood, and motherhood. So let's sip some tea and pray we get through another day of this shit. Hello everyone, welcome back to Sip and Sala. My name's Aaliyah. You all probably know by now because it's episode 11. It's been 11 weeks of this. So I hope you're all enjoying it. I hope you're all learning something about yourself from it, even if it is at my expense, because at the end of the day, that's why I created this. I created this because I had so many thoughts trapped in my mind, and I almost wanted a delayed response. You know, like if you talk to your partner, if you talk to your friends, they almost give you a bit of immediate gratification. I think when you talk to somebody and you're upset or you're angry or you're distressed or whatever, the natural thing for somebody to do is to calm you down. But actually filming it, putting it out there, letting a stranger almost comment on it, but then also the fact that you get to listen back to it when you're not in that frame of mind, I thought would be helpful. And little did I know, it turns out it was. So, well, for me anyway. So, welcome back. Lots of you may be here off the back of episode 10 because that was very chaotic, dramatic, and raw, but it was the truth. It was my truth. It's our truth. And it was really a small snippet of our current reality. Now, I just want to explain something. So, those who are new here, my name's Aaliyah. Those who aren't new, you know who I am, you know who we are. If you don't, with the Salah Socials, my name's Aaliyah. My husband's name's Farhan. If you came from the previous episode, we've been married for 10 years. We've shared a lot more on social media about our marriage, about, just all the things, right? However, I didn't start this podcast for the marriage. I started it purely for myself. I felt as though I had loads of thoughts trapped in my mind and I just couldn't get them out. I couldn't get them out. I couldn't get them out. So anyway, this is episode 10 and we're going to call this one my own worst enemy. So before we get into this episode, I do want to go back on the back of the last episode, just because I know that the last episode, it kind of caused a bit of a stir on the internet, which I get. I completely get. I don't. I don't. I don't know. It sounds silly, and loads of you are gonna be like, that doesn't make sense. But I know I'm filming something to put it out there for people to watch. But in your mind, in my mind anyway, logically, you almost think nobody's watching. So. But I knew what I was gonna get, and I'm not mad about it. I wanna cover a couple things though, not to justify, not to explain, but purely to give you all context. So, firstly, this is my podcast. I do have a family page. We have a family page called Salah Socials on Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube. That is content of me and my family, right? But I am the content creator behind it. I edit it. So although I'm the dominant behind that, it's our thing. This is just purely my thing. This is purely my thing that I schedule, that I plan, that I take time to do. So anytime you see anybody, it won't be anybody, but him on here, it's obviously something that I've thought about. I never tell him either because I don't want a planned response, right? So let's just clear that up. This is my podcast. If you want to hear Farhan's podcast, send him a DM. Ask him to set up a podcast. But I want to explain the whole relationship thing because so many people were new listeners from last episode and only ever listened to that episode. So I want to give you all a bit of context as to why I chose to do that and what I hope to get from that. So, like I'd said on episode, I think it was 8 or 9, that me and my husband were like bumping heads, and I find that every 2 to 3 years we just bump heads. But in marriage, it's sacrifice. Most people sacrifice, they compromise, right? So I normally find that I say every other year. When I say every other year, I mean every other 3. Every other 3 years when we've clashed, either he's pissing me off and I'm just being understanding, or I'm pissing him off and he's being understanding. But this time, it almost felt different. It almost felt like we were butting heads, but we were both refusing to move on our stance. Now, you may have seen more of that from me on the previous episode, or you may have seen it from him. I don't know, but I need you to all understand that that's 1 hour. That's 1 hour of our lives. We've both openly admitted that we both have these traits that aren't helpful to either one of us in marriage. But that's not why I made that. I didn't make this podcast for it to be Team Aaliyah, Team Farhan. Tell me who you think has got the problem here. That's not why I did it. At the beginning of this year, I quit my job, which I told you all about on that was episode 8, I think. And I found myself with more time. So when I found myself with more time, I started to work out more. I hate working out, but it started to help me more mentally. And little did you all know, I've spent years in therapy and in counselling. I've spent years, but it hit me this year, and this is why I chose to do the podcast. So this is why I'm here to explain, right? I experienced. How do I explain this? It's so difficult because I get why some of you don't understand. Like some of you don't understand the emotion or the backstory, but I'm just not ready. We even in our marriage, that small conversation that you heard, it wasn't a complete conversation. You know, like we save a little bit for ourselves. You understand? And the same here with me. I haven't shared my entire story with anybody. But I experienced. How do I explain this? And I don't want to cry again. God, everyone thinks I'm incredibly emotional, which is beautiful, but I'm really not. Not that it's a bad thing, but I've never cried so much. I actually took a pregnancy test after the other one because I thought, what's wrong with me? But anyway, I grew up in I don't know. I grew up and I experienced things that children shouldn't have had to experience. Even in my teenage years, I was, now I can, oh, I don't want to cry again. Now I can say it because I'm not in it, but I was honestly fighting for my life. I swear to you. No, but this is one thing why, like, I don't even care what I see. I always say the internet's not real because not that I was on the internet at this time. However, I used to have a little bit of Snapchat and stuff like that. And I know that my best friends and people who watch me on Snapchat and stuff never would have thought anything was wrong with me. But I was in the most suicidal place of my life. I can't do this crying shit again. I was fueling my misery with alcohol. I The only way I knew how to escape my own mind was to take myself out of it. So when I met Farhan, um, I was like that, but trying to think. When I met Farhan, I was like that, but he didn't try to understand. Do you know what I mean? He was, like, when I say didn't try to understand, I mean, like, other people just be like, oh, that's Aaliyah, she's fucking crazy. Like, what's wrong with you? You're crazy. Where he was just like, how was your day? And I'd never had that before. You know what I mean? See, either people address your frantic behavior or they become a part of it. You understand? They party with you, they become frantic with you. I've only had those two. I never had a middle. So when I met Far, I really struggled to interact with him in the beginning because fucking hell. We're not doing this again, for fuck's sake. Let me get tissues this time. So when I met Far, I struggled to understand his communication, but I always knew it's because he was a healthy communicator. I always knew that. I never wanted him to be my counselor. So every time the conversation would get deep, I'll be honest, I would literally just stand up in the middle of the room and just leave. I would be like, I've got to go. And you might all be like, what? And most people will be like, what the fuck? What did he do? How did he react? But he'd just be like, have you got to go right now? And I'd be like, yeah, I have to leave. And he'd be like, all right, I'll text you. Do you understand? Like, how do you run away from something like that? And I found myself constantly wanting to be around him, even though I didn't like what he came with, because what he came with was quite confronting to me. Like, he never said, "Oh, you got an issue," and nobody around me was ever saying I got an issue. But I almost knew I had an issue with alcohol. Almost, like, I just knew. I just knew. I just knew. And even I remember telling him after I got out of it, and I was like, I definitely had an issue with alcohol. I didn't know how to live without being intoxicated because I just didn't want to live in my own reality. But anyway, after I met him and I told him, a bit of my life story and all the rest of it, he became a bit of like I used to call him my therapist, and I used to think that was a term of endearment, but it's become a bit of a curse. It's become a bit of a it's become a bit of a burden without realizing, and these are my words, not his. He doesn't see an issue with it, but I do. Because when somebody knows you like that, to that extent, they get both sides of you. Do you understand? So it's really difficult. But anyway, God, I don't know why I'm doing this. Anyway, um, fast forward, me and Far, we've had, a couple bumps in the road. Not a couple bumps, that's not true. Me and Far have had issues, right? But our issues have actually, and you will never be, you're all gonna be like, nah. I think one out of 10 of our issues have been like my behaviour. We've had so many bigger things that we've overcome, right? And I want to make it clear, and this is not me, trying to throw Farhan under the bus, but I want to give you absolute context. We have both done things. Oh, when I say done things, it just like it gives me the icks. I'm like, that sounds like we like cheated on each other. We have never done any of that stupidness, but we've both unintentionally hurt each other, and this is why I get back to this point, because I feel like it's almost become unintentionally intentional now. Because like I said on the previous years where we bump heads, one of us would be forgiving, when now it's starting to feel like both of us are not so forgiving for each other anymore. So, like I said, when I quit my job this year, at the beginning of this year, our marriage was just trucking along. But I'll be honest, I was absolutely miserable. I was absolutely miserable, and I'd spoke to Far a couple of times, and he was like, it could be worse. Far's like that, he's like, I've got a roof over my head, got food in my belly, things could be worse. But I was saying to him, they could be worse, but they could also be so much better, man. Like, don't settle for this just for the fact, that I'm your wife, and I wouldn't settle for you. I wouldn't want anybody to do that. And this is where we've opened up this kind of worms, because I've stirred something that I know Far wouldn't stir on his own back. Not unless it was really severe. Like, he just wouldn't. He's not that kind of person. But I've stirred it for a reason, because the childhood history which led me to be all chewed up when I met him, and what he helped me heal from and continues to help me heal from, started then to show itself in our marriage, because I had lots of situations in my childhood and my teens where I was just let down by so many people. So when my husband, so when my husband began to disengage and disconnect, which rightly so, I began to get that same feeling that it was helping me heal from him. Oh, God. Which changed my approach and my level of patience and my level of calmness towards him. And even when there's no issue and we're communicating, I remember I used to we'd laugh in the car, but when the conversation goes quiet, in my mind, I'm thinking, why did I say that? And he's not even saying that there's an issue with what I said. But in my mind, I'm thinking, why did I say that? So I made that podcast the other day because I realised, like, I'm becoming somebody I don't actually like. I'm becoming somebody I don't want to represent them. And I'm becoming somebody that I wouldn't want my children to replicate either. So I filmed the podcast because I wanted you all, and Farhan, without knowing, to just have an honest chat and really get an honest opinion from a listening ear, not from myself, not from my internal mind, not from him, not from someone who knows me, from just you can't it's a podcast, you listen, right? So listening to it, I listened to myself and I realized that, you know what, I want to be able to regulate my emotions. So no matter what I'm being delivered, I'm still delivering the same thing. Because someone actually commented on the previous video, you need to lean into your feminine energy more. And it's funny you say that because I've been saying to Farhan for years. I've said to Farhan for years. I've obviously dated people outside of mine and Far's marriage before I met Farhan. Oh, God. I've said to him, no one I've ever dated has ever allowed me to feel like the woman. And I constantly feel like I'm being like a lioness. And sometimes people can see that as a sign of endearment. But it's only endearing when you're doing it out of choice, not out of like, survival. And the more I thought about it this year as well, I thought about my mom. Like my mom, everyone always called her that. They always said, "Oh my God, your mom, she's a warrior." And I always thought that was a beautiful thing. But actually, I must, as I'm getting older, I'm starting to realize how much of a lonely place that must have been for her as a single parent. And you know, with the utmost respect, I don't want to be her. So this is why I made the podcast, because I wanted to be able to see myself. I wanted to be able to see myself through someone else's eyes. I feel like that's the only way I'm going to come to terms with my approach. And it sure did that. So, like I said, I'm not perfect. No one is. But that was the whole backstory behind last week's podcast. And again, it's allowed both me and Far to look at each other's perspectives and not be thinking, like sometimes you can think, well, if she would have did that, then this, or I think if he would have did that, then this. And I even said to him, I want us to see it as how could I have delivered that in a different way where he got a different message from me and vice versa, because we're stuck bumping heads up. He's not listening to me, I'm not listening to him, boom, boom, boom. You know what I mean? So anyway, that was last week's episode. Let's just wrap that up because I don't want to sit here crying again. But like I said, this episode is called My Own Worst Enemy, and I just want to point out, man, I never thought I never thought that the person that helped me get through so much in my life would become part of that problem. And like I said, again, it's about realizing it's more of a me problem than anyone else. I just want to find peace in my own mind. I want to be at a place where nobody can disturb my energy. No, I don't care who you are. Like, I don't care what you say, how you treat me. This is what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to find a place of peace. And you know what? Most people can't disturb me, but my husband has been disturbing me, and that is a me issue. You're all right. It's a me issue. Trust me. you know, but it's one that I'm not unconscious of, and one that I hope that talking through can help someone else, because when I first met Foy, I used to always say, "Here she is again, self-sabotaging," and we almost thought that stage phased out, but obviously it's not. Here it is, it's back again. So I want to dedicate this episode to just facing my demons, to just resetting. We need to reset. I just need to reset. I need to just start again. I need to clear my conscience. I need to find a way to, like, I just need to be able to stay as one, no matter my surroundings, no matter my response, no matter the reciprocation. And I think if I do that and my husband does that, our marriage will thrive. But even if I just do that, I as a person will thrive. So yeah, that's where we stand with that. And that's what I'm trying to do. So yeah, I've had counselling out, and I've said that I should have more counselling, but I do think I've become my own therapist. I think it's it's possibly the most productive therapy I've had, I'll say that. I find that sometimes in therapy, they try and find core problems, focus on that problem, and do you know what I'm saying? I've got a lot of issues. I've got too many issues to focus on one. So I have become my own worst enemy. And I don't want you all to think like, oh, give yourself a break, give yourself this, give yourself that. I don't want a break, while I'm awake and I'm conscious of these things, why not try to fix them? Why not try to become a better person? And in return, that will also hopefully make my marriage better. So yeah, I'm spending this time working on myself, working on my communication styles, working on not letting my past show up in my current relationship, and there's certain things that will. I don't care what anyone says, yes, they will. You don't know my life story, and that's just that. But there's certain things the things that do, I want to be able to have control on how I deal with them. And that is what I feel like I lost control of because I kind of put my husband in this therapist box. You don't expect your therapist to cause you the trauma, do you know what I mean? But it's life. We're all human. We all do things. And I think whilst we're just honest with ourselves, we can only get better. And that's just that. I'm going to go work out because I'm really stressed actually from this conversation. I don't know why I'm getting so stressed. I'm just like, I've got a headache. I do want to say though, I do want to say to many people because I got so many DMs saying, thanks for being so honest. Like, you don't have to thank me. This is the truth. This is the reality. And I don't care what anyone says. I know so many people who are in miserable marriages. And if I can be completely honest, my husband would and will, in my opinion, sit in more of a uncomfortable situation than I will. You understand? Like, I don't agree with that. And some people say, you must, you must do this, you must do that, you must be this, you must be that. But it's actually okay to want more for yourself. I want to normalize that. It's okay to want more for yourself. It's okay to say, this standard is not meeting my standard. But where I'm going wrong is how I'm going about it. When my needs aren't being met, I'm immediately becoming agitated and angry and upset because I've got this expectation of this person that he should be able to know what I want at this point. But the truth is, he doesn't. And people change. And he's changed and I've changed. So, you know what? If your needs aren't being met, it's fine to talk about it. It's fine to say it. And anyone who says it isn't, who cares? Who cares? Only you know your own soul. Only you know what's good for your soul. So let me normalize that. And let me just point out that, like, I do think this is marriage. I think that this is the good, the bad, and the ugly. And my standard for marriage, for my marriage anyway, is just much higher than I ever had it before. So it's about coming to terms with meeting those standards, you know, patiently. I sometimes have like a one-track mind of, right, I'm ready for this now, let's go. And I almost, I have a quick turnaround. You've all seen that. I'm very, my husband's not. So I'm trying to be more patient. I hope he's being more patient with me. And I know that we'll get through this because we've been through worse. I don't doubt we'll go through worse. And at the end of the day, we are best friends. We're the best of friends, actually. So this episode is where I'm leaving my own worst enemy. I'm leaving it here. I'm saying, you know what? Fuck off. I'm sick of you. Get out my head. Get out my face. That's that. And that's on period. I think you guys are sick of hearing me crying. So I'm leaving it here. Next episode, we're not talking about feelings. I don't want to do it anymore. Seriously. You know the drill. If you're new here, give me a 5-star review. If you don't think I deserve it, hold it. Save it for the next episode. And if you're watching on YouTube, please do subscribe and give me a like. And if you're watching any of the podcast platforms, then please do follow. And let's stop crying, please, because I can't do this anymore. I'm actually exhausted. At this point, I'm literally thinking I'd rather go and hoover than cry anymore. Like, that's how I feel. So I'm going to go do that.